All right, welcome back to my channel, guys, and welcome back to my kitchen. In this episode, I'm gonna teach you guys how to make one of my favorite backcountry hunting foods, and that is a traditional, non-traditional Native American recipe called pemmican. I'm not going to go into great detail about what pemmican is and the history of it or anything like that, other than this is a very calorie, protein rich food that I use on carnivore diet to fuel me in the backcountry on backcountry hunts. So let's dive right in. Let's see what we've got here. I'll show you the ingredients. I'll show you each step of the process, the equipment that I'm going to use to make this pemmican. And again, as always with any kind of recipe, these measurements and the things that I'm going to show you are not exact. You can mess with them, you can change them, really to make it what fits your needs and your taste palette. I'm going to show you and share with you some of the things that I use, that I like, that I've found to make this a really enjoyable treat for the backcountry. Because pemmican itself, without some of these ingredients, can be pretty tough to swallow. In fact, the first time that I ever made pemmican, it was terrible. In fact, I had to throw it out, and I didn't revisit this episode, or I'm sorry, this recipe or even this food staple for probably close to 5 to 8 years, probably, just because that first batch was so bad. I was like, I'm never making that again. That was a waste of food and whatnot. So let's dive right in. I'll show you the ingredients of what I have and what I'm going to use to make this pemmican recipe. Again, you don't have to follow this exactly like I make it, but it's pretty dang good. And I think if you make it this way, or at least close to this, you're going to like it as well. So let's dive in. Okay, so let's talk about the main ingredients for pemmican. The main ingredients are going to be some form of a dehydrated, dried protein, preferably some sort of venison, elk. You can use beef if that's all you have, but you need a red meat of some sort that you've got to dry out or dehydrate in some form or fashion, because all of the ingredients, with the exception of a couple, are going to be dried, dehydrated to some extent that we can turn it into a powder. So let's talk about the first thing that we've got here. The first major ingredient is going to be this guy, and this guy is this is going to be venison. And so what I've done with this venison here is, this is a mule deer that I killed a couple of years ago, and I ground up, some of the leftover stuff that I either wanted to turn into jerky or into pemmican. And when I say jerky, like jerky sticks, not dehydrated slabs of meat. And so I've got roughly, probably close to actually 2.5 pounds here of just hamburger ground up venison. Again, you can use any kind of red meat. It doesn't necessarily have to be ground, but the one thing that you do want to do is try to have a meat that is relatively low in fat content. This venison that I have here, I didn't add any fat to it when I ground it up. It's just pretty much just pure meat. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and brown that in this skillet later in just a few moments. And then we're going to dehydrate that so that it gets to the point where we can pretty much pulverize it into a powder. All right, so let's talk about ingredient number 2. The second most important ingredient in pemmican is beef suet, and that's this guy right here. This beef suet, hopefully you can see, maybe it'll focus, maybe, there we go, is literally just beef fat that I picked up from the supermarket. You can pick this up pretty much at any any supermarket or a good grocery store that cuts their own meats. Obviously, if you've got a local meat supplier, you can pick it up there. I have found that the price of beef suet can vary widely. If I get this at Albertsons in town, it's about $6 to $7 a pound, which is ridiculous. If I go to my local feed store and get it, or my meat butcher, I can get it for around $3 to $4 a pound. And every once in a while, they'll have it at the local market here in town, which is where I picked this one up today. And this one is $2.99 a pound. You want to get anywhere from 4 to 5 pounds for a batch of pemmican. This one's 4 pounds, but I actually have a brisket that I'm gonna cook this weekend. And so I'm gonna trim off some of the fat of that brisket, and I'm gonna make some tallow with that. Because ultimately what we're gonna do is we're gonna chop this up into little tiny pieces. We're gonna render it down into a beautiful golden liquid called tallow, and that's gonna be one of the main bases of our pemmican recipe. The next kind of major staple, and this is where some foods of thought, pun intended, have varied a little bit. I like to include blueberries in my recipe. I've tried different fruits. Blueberries seem to be the best. And historically, or I shouldn't say historically, but in the carnivore diet, obviously berries are not part of the carnivore. It's just animal-based products. But blueberries and berries that end in berry typically have a low glycemic index. Therefore, they're not going to spike your insulin as much, and so that's what we're looking for. And the blueberries just add really good antioxidants and just a good flavor to the pemmican overall. And our ancestors, the Native Americans, they had access to berries. So we're going to use berries in this. I like to pick up 2 pretty large containers of berries. Generally speaking, I like to go with organic. And you'll notice that these ones are really large berries. I don't like to get the big berries like that because it means they've been genetically modified. This is not what natural blueberries look like. But this is all they have in the stores that I could find, so that's what we're gonna use. And we're gonna dehydrate those berries. A note on dehydrating berries, blueberries specifically, they take forever, so just prepare for that. We'll talk more about that here in a minute. All right, the next ingredient is honey. Honey is a really, really important ingredient, at least in my opinion, for pemmican. This is really what makes it palatable, to be honest with you. You gotta have something a little bit of sweet, and honey is maybe not by the purest carnivore, a carnivore food, but it is an animal-based product. It's great for energy in the backcountry. This is really what you need for energy in the backcountry, especially in the pemmican bars. And this is what makes it really palatable. All right, let's talk about next some non-traditional things that I've added to my pemmican to make it a little bit more palatable, a little more nutritional, which maybe some people would argue pemmican in itself is pretty nutritional, and it is, but there's some things that you can add that I think really help for the backcountry. The first thing I'm going to talk about is this guy. This is MCT oil, MCT oil powder, and this is basically just unflavored 2.5 grams of MCTs. This is something that you can add to your coffee to kind of make it a creamer. But what I really like about it is it's very calorie dense, and it just adds a unique flavor profile to some extent. Like, it's almost flavorless, but it kind of isn't. But the thing that I really like about it is it's more calories. One of the things that I really struggle with in the backcountry, I'm really active, I move around a lot, I hike hard, I hunt hard, I need a lot of calories in the backcountry. You know, we're burning anywhere from 4,000 to 5,000 calories, up to 10,000 calories a day when we're in the backcountry, just really grueling it out with a heavy pack, or you're packing out an animal. You need a lot of calories, and so this is a really good, clean, extra source of calories that you can add to your pemmican recipe. The one reason that I really like adding this to pemmican is not only for the calories, but it also helps hold the pemmican together. And so there's a variety of MCT oils that you can use, powders that you can use. You want to make sure you use the powder, not the oil itself, because the oil will not help hold it together. You have to use the powder. Coconut milk powder is pretty much the same thing. Again, very calorie dense, and both of these products really don't add very much carbohydrates. Which, again, if you're on carnivore, strict carnivore, you want to try to avoid the carbohydrates. This MCT oil powder is 2 grams of carbohydrates per serving. A serving is 1 tablespoon. So just something to be aware of. Again, you can use coconut milk powder. This does provide a better taste than this does. All right, next thing we're gonna talk about really quick is this guy. And this is a bone broth protein powder, unflavored. Again, this just adds some extra protein. It adds some extra amino acids, a lot of actually extra amino acids, sodium, potassium, and calcium, along with protein. And so again, just more nutrients to your pemmican bar. The other thing that I like about adding a protein powder to my pemmican bars is, again, it kind of holds, because you'll see when we make it, we're gonna be using liquid hot tallow, like melted tallow. And it's gonna dry out, or it's not gonna dry out, it's gonna harden in the refrigeration process. It'll be shelf stable for indefinitely. But one thing you'll notice with tallow is that if it's warm out, it gets soft, it gets mushy, it gets kind of a really undesirable texture. And the protein powder, along with the MCT powder, will help kind of bind that tallow together and hold it together a little bit better. It's one thing I found. So you can use unflavored. This brand is Zamex Nutrition, and it's just bone broth powder, protein powder. Another brand that I really like to use is this Ancient Nutrition, and this is the salted caramel. It's friggin' delicious, and it doesn't have any carbohydrates in it either. So again, just another product you can use. I really like this. I'll kind of show you the back here so you can take a look at the nutritional value. You can use any kind of protein powder, but I do suggest adding some form of protein powder. Now, I can't do whey. My body doesn't produce or doesn't digest whey real well. And honestly, I haven't tried whey in a number of years before I went on carnivore, so maybe it would be better now, but you could try whey protein. I just don't know what that would look like. The last product that I like to add to my pemmican recipe is this guy. This is, I'm not even gonna try to pronounce this. You can read it.
Acai berry
powder. It's great for blending into smoothies. Again, this is just something that gives it a little extra flavor, gives you a little extra antioxidants in your pemmican. You don't want to go overboard with this because it can make it a little tart, but I really like it. I since added it into the last couple of batches, so we're going to throw it into this batch. All right, let's get down to the steps here. Okay. The next thing that we're gonna do is get our blueberries dehydrated, because as I stated earlier, these things take forever. And the bigger the berry, the longer they're gonna take to dehydrate. So what I'm gonna do here is, and what I should do is rinse these off first. So we're gonna rinse these off, and once we get them rinsed off, then we're gonna poke a hole in each one of the blueberries with this fancy little toothpick. We're gonna lay them out onto our dehydrator sheets, and we're gonna dehydrate those at 140 degrees until they get dehydrated, whatever that looks like. Now, that could be 24 hours, that could be 48 hours, that could be 72 hours. I've found that just dehydrating blueberries sucks. It takes forever. And this is a step that I wish I could skip, but you can't. There are products, I have found dehydrated blueberries on Amazon. The issue is you gotta make sure that they don't have any added sugars in them. So if you have the time and the ability to dehydrate your own blueberries, I highly suggest you do that. So I'm gonna rinse these really quick, and then we're gonna poke holes in them and get them on our dehydrator sheets. All right, guys, so again, we're just gonna painstakingly poke a hole completely through each one of these blueberries using a toothpick. Yeah, it sucks, it's gonna take a while, but I have found that, or at least this is an attempt to try to get them to dehydrate faster. All right, one of the things you guys can do to make this go a lot faster is to take your toothpick and just start stabbing blueberries. lining them up on your toothpick there, and you can get 3 or 4 onto a thing, and then we'll just slide them off. And this just makes this process go a lot faster. Again, it doesn't have to be pretty. We're just poking holes in them. So stab them, get them on your toothpick, slide them off onto the dehydrating tray, and you move on. Makes this process go a lot faster, obviously. So there you go. That's today's pro tip. All right, guys, so we've got our blueberries all poked holes. That didn't take too terribly long. It wasn't too painstaking. It took maybe 5 to 8 minutes or so. We're just spreading them out now on our dehydrating trays, our dehydrating sheets. I talked about these dehydrating sheets in my pemmican video, or I'm sorry, in my sweet potato leather video. And so if you have any questions, I'll have a link to, again, all the products that I use in the comments below, in the description, sorry, not in the comments. And so here we go. We're gonna put this last tray of blueberries into our great dehydrator over here. And again, we're gonna let this thing run. I've got it set for 30 hours, and I'll check it probably sometime tomorrow just to see where they're at. But that takes the longest. So let's move into the next step, which is going to be cutting up our beef suet so that we can get this rendered down into some tallow. Okay guys, the next step is going to be cutting up our beef suet into small chunks and rendering that down into the tallow. So let's go ahead and get this plastic wrap cut off of here. And you want to make sure that we use as much of the tallow as we can, but we need to trim off any of the meat that's showing. And so that can be kind of tricky sometimes. It's not terribly difficult. We'll save that. That'll make a good treat for the dog later. Basically, anything that's got any major chunks of meat on it, we want to trim that off. So anything that looks like that, it's got to come off. And then the rest can be chunked up. Now, if you do have, sometimes you'll see these weird fat little deposits in the meat, like this guy right here. We're going to cut those out as well because we don't want to taint that tallow. We want it to be as pure as possible. And this doesn't have to be perfect. And as I mentioned earlier, maybe I think the smaller the chunks, the better. So I try to keep them about 1 inch in size. This tallow is frozen. I picked it up from the market this morning. And so it's still a little frozen, which actually makes it cutting it a lot easier. You don't want it to be too frozen that you can't cut it, but you want it to be frozen enough that it's not just mushing in your hands. Mako dog smells some tallow, don't you, buddy? Yeah, I'll give you a treat here in a minute. All right, so trying to rush through this. We're gonna get this cut up, and then once we get all of this tallow cut up, we're gonna add about 1 cup of water to our Instant Pot here. Now you don't have to do this in an Instant Pot. You can do this on the stove. I do it in the Instant Pot for convenience sake. It just makes it a lot easier to do it in the Instant Pot, especially if I'm working. I can throw this in the Instant Pot in the morning, and then when I come home in the evening from work, if I set it for like an hour of pressure and then just keep warm, it will keep warm all day long. It'll continue to render that that tallow down, and then when I get home I can finish it, and I'll show you what that process looks like. Again, got a pretty good chunk of meat there that we don't want turned into fat. And not, again, the meat really isn't going to hurt your tallow. It's just you want to try to have as good clarified tallow as you can, as free from meat as you can. And again, the smaller you chunk this down, the better it's going to render. Okay guys, so we've got our tallow all chunked up, as you can see here all into nice, pretty, not really, chunks of tallow. And as you can see, that a little over 4 pounds of tallow, even trimmed, pretty much filled up my Instant Pot. And as I mentioned earlier, you don't have to use an Instant Pot for this. You can use a regular stovetop pot. Obviously you want a pot big enough to do this. And then you're just gonna boil it for hours until it renders down. That's why I like using the Instant Pot, because it's just, it's easy, right? Like I don't have to mess with it. So I'm gonna add a cup of water. I'm actually gonna probably add 2 cups of water, or a cup and a half. Let's do a cup and a half. The last time I think I did 2 cups of water. We're gonna add a cup and a half of water. Can't talk, sorry. We're gonna throw that in our Instant Pot, and gotta find my lid here. And we're gonna go ahead and, again, make sure our seal is ready to go. We're gonna set it on manual. Actually, let's do meat, because usually that's a little bit longer. And I'm gonna set this for 60 minutes. And I'm gonna leave it on the keep warm setting. And then once it's done, I'm gonna be cooking and doing other things. I'm gonna make some other freeze-dried meals today that I'm working on. While it's doing that, it's just gonna boil and simmer down and literally render the fat out. And as that does that, the moisture will evaporate. Now it can evaporate obviously in the Instant Pot while it's sealed up and doing its thing. So you'll see when I take the lid off after an hour from now, most of the fat's gonna be pretty rendered, but it's gonna be really murky and it's gonna be kind of cloudy, and the fat's gonna still be fatty, I guess. I don't know what else to call it. I'll show you that. When we get to that stage, we're gonna turn our Instant Pot onto saute, and we're gonna boil it out, and we're gonna render out the remainder of that fat. So let's move on to step 3. All right, guys, so step 3 is gonna be browning our deer hamburger. And that's obviously pretty simple. I don't need to teach you guys how to do that. We're just gonna cut our packaging off here. Ooh, try not to spill too much blood. Off of our meat. And we have a visitor because we have meat, obviously. Introduce Mako the dog. You guys probably can't see him. Hey, buddy. No, sorry, this is not for you. He wishes it was, however. Go ahead and get our stove fired up here. And yeah, this is pretty simple, guys. We're just gonna go ahead and ground up this meat. This stuff is on the borderline of needing to be thrown out. As you can see, it's starting to freezer burn just a tad bit, but that's fine. It's gonna get cooked and dehydrated, so if there was anything wrong with it, it would be just fine. And again, we're not gonna add anything to this. It does look like this might have been a batch that I did add a little bit of fat to, but that's okay. So basically, we're gonna cook all of the fat out of it regardless. We're just gonna brown this hamburger until it's completely brown. And then once it's browned up, I've got this container right here already prepped and ready to go. This is just obviously a Tupperware container that I lined with some paper towels. The reason for the paper towels is to soak up any of the excess fat from the meat, because if the fat isn't completely rendered within the meat, it will go bad. So this is one really important step that you can't skip if you're going to use any kind of like ground up burger or anything like that. If I just dehydrated this meat, if I threw this straight into the dehydrator, the fat itself would never actually properly render, and our pemmican would go bad. It would get rancid because of the fat inside of the meat. But because we're gonna cook this, we're gonna cook out that fat and render the fat that's in the meat while we're cooking it, while we're turning it into ground hamburger, cooked burger basically. And any of that fat that's left over is pretty much rendered and it can go into the pemmican. But I'm gonna drain that into this. I found out it just works better because we're gonna grind this up in our food dehydrator after we've dehydrated it. And so if there's any of even that rendered fat in with this meat, it makes it really hard to kind of pulverize and turn into a powder. So you need to make sure you got a container with some paper towels in it to render out or to at least absorb any remaining fats that don't get cooked out of the meat while we're cooking it. All right guys, as we continue to brown our meat here, one of the important things that you need to do is drain off the fat as you're cooking it. As I mentioned earlier, I thought these packages were packages that I didn't add any extra fat or suet to when I made it, but I made this a couple years ago, so I don't exactly remember. So I'm gonna drain off some of the fat to this. We're gonna find a good suitable container. Probably just use a bowl for now, and we'll drain off some of this fat out of here. Try to without making a gigantic mess. Also helps to cook it a little faster. So we're just going to continue to do that. Our meat is probably halfway cooked. Again, I want to make sure we get all the fat rendered out of this meat, so we're almost going to overcook it a little bit. We're not going to lose any of that nutritional value from it. So while you're cooking your hamburger, it's really good, or your meat, I should say, it is hamburger. It's really important to kind of pulverize it and break it down into the smallest chunks possible. And again, this is two-part because it'll dehydrate a lot faster, and it will also grind up a lot better once we put it in the food processor. I've found that the first time that I made pemmican, as I mentioned earlier, it was really not good. It didn't turn out the way I wanted it to. It was not palatable. It didn't taste good. The texture was really off. And in that first attempt, I used whole muscle jerky that I dehydrated, over-dehydrated it, sliced it really, really, really thin, and over-dehydrated it to the point where once I kind of broke it into chunks and put it into, at the time I didn't have a good food processor, so that didn't help. I just had a really good blender. And the blender did a pretty good job of pulverizing it, but it just didn't work as well as this method works. So again, you know, if you guys want to experiment and you want to try with whole muscle jerky, I prefer to make whole muscle jerky into actual like jerky, right? I don't want to use that in my pemmican. I would rather take my scrap meat, which is what this is basically, and turn it into a hamburger and cook it this way and dehydrate it this way. I feel like it just turns out better. That's just my personal opinion. There might be guys out there that do it differently, but this seems to be the best method for me. It is a little time consuming. There's a lot of processes to this, but the end result and the product is well worth it. Okay guys, our hamburger is pretty much done. As you can see here, hopefully, it's starting to actually kind of get really dark brown on the bottom. And there's really no fat liquid in here. We don't want to burn it, but we want it to be obviously pretty pulverized and well done to the point where there's just not much fat left in the meat, if any. So we're gonna go ahead and shut this guy off and get this scooped into our container. Wow, that handle got really hot. Let's not burn ourselves. So, okay, hopefully you can see. And we're just gonna go ahead and scoop out our hamburger into our container here. And one thing you can do, guys, if you find yourself where you don't have like a whole weekend to devote to making something like this, you can obviously freeze this. I would let it cool overnight in the refrigerator, so that all of that fat kind of leaches down. If there's any other or any more fat in the meat that didn't, you know, it stuck to the particles, grease is grease, right? And so I would let it sit in the refrigerator overnight before I freeze it. So one of the things that you need to do is let it sit like this, uncovered for about an hour or so until it stops steaming, and then cover it and then refrigerate it. Again, we want that moisture to release. We don't want the meat to hold that moisture. And it's gonna get dehydrated out anyway, but it's just a good practice to let it sit on the counter for about an hour or so, maybe not even, maybe 20 minutes. However long it takes to just naturally cool off and stop steaming, cover it, refrigerate it overnight, and then you can freeze it and come back to it and use it whenever you need it. All right, guys, welcome back. And we are almost getting closer to getting our liquid tallow rendered down. So I wanted to take a minute to show you. I ran it 60 minutes on high pressure, and then I actually trimmed up my brisket that I'm smoking in the smoker this weekend, and I added some more fat and then ran it for another 45 minutes. And now we let the pressure naturally release. We're gonna pull the lid. I'm gonna show you exactly what it will look like and what we're gonna do next. So let's go ahead and do that now. We'll pull off this lid, and hopefully you guys can see what this looks like. You're gonna have kind of these pale looking bits of fat, and then inside there you're gonna have kind of a creamy milky looking liquid. And so what we want to do is we're gonna go ahead and set our Instapot on saute, and we'll do it for 30 minutes, and that's gonna bring this up to a boil, and we're just gonna stir it with our little slotted spoon here. All of the water has more or less evaporated, and whatever water is left will evaporate as this cooks. And ultimately, it's gonna boil down to the point where all these little fat particles, all these little pieces of fat are gonna turn into little brown crispy nuggets of deliciousness. And at the end of that process, this is what we're gonna get right here. This is the good stuff. That is basically what we call liquid gold, and that is completely purified tallow. And so you can already start to see it's starting to bubble up there a little bit. But like I said, this is our goal. This is what we're gonna go with. And that's about how much, this was actually completely full all the way up to the top. And that is how much 5 pounds of fat yielded the last time I made tallow. So what you can do with this is you can actually store this in your refrigerator, and it'll harden up and it will keep indefinitely. You can throw a lid on it and it will stay in there forever. And then if you need to turn it back into liquid again, and this is exactly what I did with this, because I actually injected some of this tallow into my brisket. I just heated this up into a big pot on the stove, which I've got right over here, as you can see. So basically I filled this up with hot water, threw this guy inside the pot, turned it up until the water started boiling, until it heated this up enough that it liquefied it again. And then I just put that into my brisket. Or I could use this right now and turn this into the tallow that we'd be using for our pemmican bars, but we're gonna save that and we're gonna use this batch right here for that. So again, you're just gonna boil it. You do need to keep an eye on it at this stage and make sure that you don't overdo it. But as you can see, as it's starting to boil here, it's actually getting more murky, more cloudy, milky looking. And as it boils and renders more and more, that will start to clear up and it will look like that. So again, that's pretty much it. The next time you see me will be when this is actually boiled out and rendered to the point where we're gonna strain it and put it into a jar and save it until all of our dehydrating process is done. All right, guys, we're back and we have all of our ingredients ready to go here. We've got basically everything. We've got our dehydrated blueberries, which we'll measure that out. I think that should have yielded about a cup of blueberries. We've got our dehydrated hamburger slash deer meat, and that yielded several cups, obviously probably close to 3 cups of that. We've got our MCT oil powder. We've got our
acai berry
powder. The last time I forgot to mention collagen peptides. You can add collagen peptides, and I'm gonna add some to mine again, just to kind of firm that texture up, get some additional amino acids. We've got our bone broth powder and honey. And then last but not least, our liquid gold tallow. So let's go ahead and start mixing ingredients and getting everything measured out here. Okay, for this next part, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, you're gonna need something to put your pemmican into. There's a couple of different ways that you can make this. I choose to use these silicone molds that I got off of Amazon. And again, I'll link everything in the description of what I use for this particular recipe. I use 2 of these. They're, I think, 4 by 1.5 inch thick, deep trays, and these make really nice bars. And so out of this batch, you're gonna make about 8 bars. Something else you can use is you can use an 8x9 cookie sheet or baking pan. And sorry, I've got some more tallow boiling over here still. So we're going to, you could lay this out into that 8x9 baking pan, and you can throw that in the refrigerator, and then you can cut it into the sized bars that you want later on. You can use really any kind of silicone egg mold. I actually have some silicone muffin cups that if I have any extra that don't fit into these 8 bars, I'll actually put it into the bottom of those muffin cups and freeze those. And they turn out to be like little hockey pucks, which I think are perfect for morning snack. And then these I use for my afternoon snack or meal replacements. So let's go ahead and start mixing ingredients. All right, so first thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna measure out how much, and again, of this blueberry powder that we've ground up. I'm gonna go ahead and measure this out and see about how much we have for you guys, so you can see that as well. And as I mentioned before, you want those blueberries to be dried and crunchy to the point where they grind up into a powder, and hopefully you guys can see this. There are some small little chunks in here, and these small little chunks like this guy, they're actually really gooey and amazing, and they make the texture of this pemmican recipe really palatable. I love that crunchy little, I'm gonna eat that guy. I love that crunchy little texture that goes into the pemmican that you get from those little bits of the inside of those blueberries that just didn't dehydrate all the way. Otherwise, it's a really nice fine powder. So I've got less than a cup there. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take that cup and I'm going to add our berry powder here, our acai berry. Let's call it acai berry. I think that's how it's pronounced. If not, you guys can correct me in the comments. I'm sure I'll get butchered on it. We're just gonna go ahead and fill that up to the point where, oops, it is more or less, man, those little crunchy bits of blueberry are amazing. Until we've got about a cup, perfect cup full for our recipe here. All right, again, this is not an exact science. This is not baking. So we've got about a full cup of our blueberry and acai berries. And now we're gonna add 2 cups of our dried meat. And again, I'll show you guys here in a second. I'll give you a close-up of this as well. So what this looks like here is kind of the same thing. It's not as powdery as the berries turn out to be, but it's pretty dang close. And they're almost like little nuggets as well. And again, this I find just gives a nice texture to our pemmican, so it's not like really soggy and creamy. So 1, and 2. All right. I'm gonna grab a wooden spoon here so we can mix that stuff up. And we're just gonna go ahead and get this mixed up. Now, one thing you can do is you can mix this in your food processor. And in fact, I might do that because this is still just a little bit chunky from when we dehydrated it. I think I will. I want this to be ground up just a little bit more. There's a lot of, actually, it's not too bad. Let's get it nice and mixed up here. And then this last part again is gonna be kind of to taste and what you like. Let's grab a paper towel real quick, clean this guy off. And I'm gonna add probably 2 tablespoons of this MCT powder. We're gonna add 2 tablespoons of the collagen powder. And then we're gonna add 1, 2, 3, 4 scoops of our bone broth protein. And I'm gonna mix that in and just see kind of what consistency we've got here and what this looks like. I may want to add a little more of that MCT oil powder. I have experimented with adding element electrolytes to my pemmican bars, and it's not bad, but it's not great. It depends on what you use. I have not used the unflavored packets of element. I think I used a chocolate element the last or the first time that I tried it, and it just gave it kind of a weird aftertaste that I didn't particularly care for. And I get my electrolytes through my drink mixes, so I don't need to add it to my pemmican. This is looking pretty good. And again, kind of give you an up close of what this texture looks like. It's almost like a sand is kind of what we're looking for. And I'm gonna put a little bit in my palm here, and I'm gonna taste it. It's good. It's very good. I'm gonna add a little more of the MCT oil. I think I'm gonna do 1 kind of heaping teaspoon of that guy. Get that mixed in here. And again, everything that I'm adding is for extra nutrition or as kind of a binding agent to keep this tallow, or kind of keep the tallow binded together. All right, so next step, adding our tallow. There is no, at least not that I'm aware of, maybe there is. I add it by looking at it and just trying to mix it in and see how much is there. There may be a perfect recipe of how much tallow you should add to this, but obviously we've got a giant jar of tallow here, and I want to make sure that we don't overdo it, right? You don't want too much tallow in there. So let's take a break really quick. I'm gonna switch camera views and we will add our tallow. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and add our tallow, and we're gonna add 1 final ingredient, that's our honey here. Again, add honey to taste. I would say start off with about a 1/2 cup of honey and then add more, or you could, obviously you can't add less at that point, but a 1/2 cup is probably a good starting point. You could start with a 1/4 cup and then bump up to a 1/2 cup and then kind of go from there. You're gonna be able to taste it, so you're gonna know what it tastes like prior to forming it into the bar. So I'm gonna go ahead and add our tallow here, and for the sake of measuring it, I'll just throw it in this 1/2 cup measurement so we have an idea of exactly how much we use. All right, so that's 1/2 cup. I'm gonna go ahead and just mix this in here, and a little bit goes a long ways, trust me. And the consistency that we're looking for is gonna be just a little bit more than, say, peanut butter consistency. So now we are adding another 1/2 cup, and that will put us at 1 full cup of tallow. And you can see it's starting to get pretty runny. That's almost as much as we're gonna want to add. Yeah, that's gonna be just about perfect. So let's go ahead and add our honey now. And like I said, I'm gonna start off with a half a cup of honey. And pro tip, if you add your honey to your cup after you've put tallow in there, it'll pour out a lot easier out of your cup. Measuring device, I should say. That's probably gonna be enough honey for this batch. If I was making a double batch, if I had more blueberries, I mean, obviously I have some more dried meat here, but I'll just save that for the next batch. It's not gonna go bad. It'll stay just fine. All right, so let's get this mixed in here. And the one thing you're gonna notice is that your tallow, if it's not still really warm, you wanna make sure your tallow is obviously in liquid form and it's still fairly warm. Otherwise it's gonna start to solidify on you. And you don't want that because we wanna be able to pour it into our molds and make sure that we can form our bars. Yeah, this is looking really good here. So hopefully you guys can see that. That's kind of the consistency. It's almost like a peanut butter, maybe just a little bit runnier. And guys, if you don't get this perfect, it's not the end of the world. Again, this is not baking. This is not a science. And then just grab a little bit and taste it. That's perfect. I like it. I would say that that's on the sweet side. So if you want a little less sweet, start with a 1/4 cup of honey first. And then if you want it more sweet, then bump up to a half a cup of honey. That was honestly about perfect. So next step is we're going to put this into our molds here. And it's not rocket science, just kind of get it in there. If it's a little runnier than this, it's actually kind of a good thing because then it settles in these molds a little better. And you can warm it up if you need to. I don't want that falling off. But obviously the thicker, it's kind of a little bit the better. It doesn't necessarily smooth out in your molds as easily. I don't think this is kind of a small batch. I just didn't have enough blueberry powder. Could have added more of the meat there. And I may end up making another small batch just to make sure that my molds get filled here. But you guys get the point. You're just filling these guys up. And then once they're filled up, we will put them in the freezer and they'll get nice and hard. We'll pull them out of the molds and then I just vacuum seal them into vac bags, little individual size vac bags. All right, guys, so I threw these in the microwave for 45 seconds and you can see that they smoothed out really nicely. I shook them a little bit just to kind of get things to settle here. The air bubbles are coming up and I'm just gonna let these sit on the counter like this for about an hour and they're going to, the air bubbles are gonna continue to boil out of there or at least surface out of there. And after about 45 minutes to an hour, we're gonna throw these into, oh my gosh, my Instant Pot is just beeping like crazy at me. We're gonna go ahead and throw these in the freezer and then we'll be able to pop them out and throw them in vac seal bags. You'll get a little bit of the tallow is gonna rise to the surface and that's okay. It's just, it is what it is. So that's it, guys. Those are the pemmican bars. All right, our pemmican bars have been in the freezer overnight and they're nice and frozen. And as you can see here, as I mentioned, some of the times if it's just a little bit too much tallow in there, the tallow will come to the surface and you'll see kind of a milky liquid here at the top. That's fine, there's nothing wrong with that. They're still frozen, they're still gonna be delicious. The only issue with that is as these thaw out, you know, if you've got them in your backpack or whatever and it's hot out, that's gonna get kind of squishy and soggy. And so they're not gonna be the perfect consistency. But again, that's just kind of pemmican bars anyway. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and break these out of the molds, and then we're gonna throw them into these already sealed up vacuum seal bags. I think these are, I don't know, 5 by 8 maybe size bags. You don't have to buy these bags. You can make them out of a regular roll. I actually bought these on accident, and they work out perfect for the pemmican bar recipe. So let's do that. Let's bust these out of the mold here. It's super easy to do. Literally, you just pop them out and voila, they come out just like that, nice and clean. And then we're gonna throw one of these in a bag. A lot of times you can cut these bags in half as well because obviously there's a lot of room there. So I'm gonna cut this bag in half and seal it up twice. That way we can use the bags twice. So let's throw it in here, do that. And I'm just using a regular Food Saver vacuum sealer bag here. And that's it, pretty simple. You guys know how to run a vacuum sealer. I don't need to show you how to do that. But I'll show you the finished product once this first one's done. And then we'll rip through and make the rest of these. And that's it. I keep them in my refrigerator until I'm ready to use them, or in the freezer. I got a deep freeze out in the shop, so I'll just throw these in the deep freeze. And next season, this coming spring bear season, it's only 3.5 months away, 4 months away roughly. It's January. We'll have some wonderful pemmican snacks to throw into the backcountry, into our backpack. You've got the gist of it. You have the main ingredients. Go out there, go hunting, go backpacking, go hiking, take some pemmican bars with you. It's a great calorie dense, protein dense, and even in this version, it is a carbohydrate dense because it's got honey in it, natural source of energy. So thanks for watching, guys. This is High Country Dan. I appreciate you staying with me. If you have any questions or comments, throw them below. I'll be happy to answer those on how to make pemmican. If you have any suggestions, I'm also open to changing my recipe up. I think you guys are really gonna like this. It's kind of a nice balance of berries, protein, tallow, and honey that gives you some extra energy, good calories, good nutrients for the backcountry. So until next time, this is High Country Dan. I'm out.